Well, welcome to the Free Mind
Podcast.
Podcast.
Are the stars out tonight? I don't know if it's cloudy or bright.
All right. Well, here in the studio, plowing through Life Month again. Good old Life Month this month. And so I want to hop into this issue. We talked about the Pride Month pregame on the last episode. So now we're into the game, maybe first quarter. And stuff, has been popping off. You can see all the companies left and like all over the place just going nuts with the stuff. There were a couple encouraging things though, and I haven't gotten the confirmation on this yet, but there were a couple companies that put the flag up, and I think they got so much pushback they took it down the next day.
Or moved it to the back of the store at least.
Target, they moved their stuff. Yeah. So we were like, no, I keep going, keep driving this thing home. We talked about this last time. We're resisting the movement. We're resisting these elites up top, and that's kind of what I want to go into a little bit of in this podcast, because we hinted at that last time. Like, how is all this coordination taking place, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, man, does it happen to be that all of the sudden in the last 2 years, all the heads of these companies just ideologically bought into the whole woke ideology, into the LGBTQ plus ideology? It's possible, because it has really come to a fever pitch place, but it seems more coordinated than that. It seems more planned than just all these people agreeing.
And fast. It feels like the speed is like from second gear to seventh gear.
Yes.
And it's like, wow, whoa, wait, what Pride Month? Wait, what kids? What Pride? It's just so fast, so much. I mean, you look up, there's another company promoting it
everywhere,
to
right?
Children.
Yeah,
so
man.
I just find that really, really interesting. Why kids? I just think this warrior push towards the children. I mean, we need to really think that through, because it's one thing for adults, but they mean business.
Yeah.
The kids, I mean, baby clothing.
Well, they're coming after and I was going to actually play this later, but since you brought that up, which is fine.
Sure.
I don't know if you saw this today, but it was floating in the Twitter world. Let me pull this up real quick.
What's that?
And if you're watching, you'll be able to see it. But
yes.
Let me rewind it here.
This is heartbreaking.
So kids are, I guess they're walking into their school here. And they're being greeted by these people, maybe teachers dressed up in Pride paraphernalia gear. They got the unicorn hat on for the gender unicorn thing. So all these kids, it's like Happy Pride Month coming in. Oh, it's all over the place. Playing, walking under the rainbow, Justin Timberlake song. So this is, as far as I know, this is public school.
Yeah. I don't know for sure, but
so, I think it is, because this is Waterboy. He's from this is one of the contributors to the Cross Politic podcast out, and he's part of Douglas Wilson's church in Moscow, Idaho.
Okay.
And he said this is the only religion allowed in public schools.
Oof. See.
And that's an important point to recognize. I'm going to do a whole podcast on that before the end of Pride Month, like how it is an opposing religion. It's an opposing worldview. It's the whole, queer theory movement, but the whole LGBTQ thing, it's a religion, and they put a flag down. It's almost like a nation. It's an opposition to everything. And it's very strategic. And, any old school dictator or person who knew how to transform societies and bring about political revolution and all that kind of stuff, they knew you had to target the kids. Hitler talks about that. Everybody, that was just, I mean, that's been known. I mean, you see that even in the book of Daniel, right? Nebuchadnezzar takes over. He's like, you pull the kids in, you form their minds, and this is like, statism 101. And it's really sad, and that's why won't do at this point to duck out of the culture war. Like, it's for love of these kids. It's for the love of those people who are being victimized by this propaganda. Yeah. And now I do what I wanted to kind of bring into this podcast episode as well is talking about the coordination. I found a couple spots to pull it together in kind of a fun way. So I'm gonna play this for you guys too. And like I said, if you can watch this, it can help. But if not, I'll try to list what's going on. But this is from another podcast, and they have an interesting thing that this lady's talking about.
Only about 1.5% of the entire world's population.
Sorry, I listened to it on super fast speed. Let me go to
fast. Gosh.
All right, here we go. Let me go to 17 right here.
Only about 1.5% of the entire world's population identifies as transgender. And yet every Target across the U.S. is now selling Tuck Your Junk swimsuits. Obviously, they're not going to sell. There's just not enough of a market for it. Why are they doing this? Listen up.
Why are so many companies going woke? There had to be some reason, and after some digging, I found it. The CEI, Corporate Equality Index, aka the Woke Credit Score. It's a made-up score based on how much a company is pushing woke issues. And who made up and gives this score? An organization called the HRC, a massive political lobbying group. Apparently, HRC sends representatives to corporations every year, telling them the kind of stuff they have to make visible at the company, give them a list of demands, and if they don't follow through, there's a threat that they won't keep their CEI credit score. And why do companies even care about this made-up woke credit rating?
If they get a bad score, then the woke investor funds start putting pressure on the boards. Woke activists are mobilized out in the streets. Advertising campaigns are shut down. Anyone that continues to do business with them will also be penalized. This is fascism.
Don't play their game, don't get their investment. And who is funding the HRC? Surprise, surprise, it's George Soros' Open Society Foundation. Now, this HRC has introduced this arbitrary credit rating to everything. States, municipalities, and even schools. Imagine that. There are people who are deciding what credit score an individual school can get. They threaten them by having these big funds withhold investments into them.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that's one aspect that seems like it's got some stuff to it. I'll try to link these to the bottom. So if you're interested in kind of chasing these down, but you have that. You also have the ESG. If you haven't heard of the ESG, that's something that's worth looking up as well. But this is something. Roughly it's that same kind of thing. It's this board that has, I don't know if you remember, a long time ago, we were talking about, there was this website that Stephen brought up, and it was tracking all the churches and their views about LGBTQ issues. And I forget the name of the website, but the ESG is something that in the same way that guy was just describing, it collects the data for these companies, and it actually can penalize them. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on this, but I think the ESG is connected with the World Economic Forum. And so it has a lot to do with these businesses and even financial penalties, what they push, all this kind of stuff. So it's very much, it is centralized. In other words, it is coordinated. And there are many different coordinating pieces to this puzzle. If I can, did you have any thoughts on that, babe, before I move to this next one?
Just all of a sudden the pressure must be on from these companies to get their scores up, because I don't know if they're just more expressive during Pride Month, but I've not heard of that before. Yeah. But it's just, the push is just so strong right now. It's so over the top, and it's like, okay, so how did they get all these companies on board? So it's a fear.
Well, it's sort of tactic. Like, in the secular world, they have their liturgical calendar too. It's like an anti-Christ, anti-Christian liturgical calendar, but they have their pushes. And, so like when we do a song, sometimes in advance, we'll think, okay, we want to push this song this week, and we'll put all of our effort and resources into doing it, because you want momentum, you want it to snowball, you don't want scattered effort. So I think a lot of these month liturgical quote unquote celebrations are put on by these progressive companies. In that case, you have the Open Society Foundation, but you have these guys that are pushing it, and they do it strategically. It's not scattered. So they have a month where they ramp it up.
Okay.
And every year they push it more and more. Like, it gets crazier each summer.
Obviously.
Targets the kids more specifically. This year they kind of overplayed their hand with that in the Target case and the Satanism thing. But they've been, when you look back, they're doing it year by year.
And
it's
so
not out of the blue.
And I wonder if the payoff is better to have a high score, because they're losing money. People are withdrawing their support. And so is it like $9 million or $9 billion the Target has lost so far? And I wonder, is it worth it? It must be, because they're responding. They did push it back to the back of the store. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I think one thing I heard today that was very true is like they brought up is like the progressivist movement has a bunch of billionaires. Like George Soros is like the clear, here's the bad guy when you open up the magazine, but there's a lot like him.
Okay.
There's not as many on the conservative side that are willing to push the same thing. But the leftist progressivism tends to be real ideological, and a lot of these billionaires are fully invested. It is their religion.
I see.
And so in many cases, like in best case scenario, it's going to take a lot to combat that. But it looks like we're making some progress against those people. Otherwise, I don't think you would see any reaction from Budweiser firing, the person. Like, otherwise they just keep rolling and not even look back. But I do think there is. It takes a concerted and clear, coordinated effort on our part because of what's behind the other side, if that makes sense. So here's one more video I want to play real quick, if I can. Let's see. I might have to wait till it loops back here, but this is something I just saw floating around today. I couldn't find the video by itself, but here's this other lady's going to be talking about it. But this is Larry Fink. Right, so I believe he's the CEO of BlackRock.
Okay.
And if you haven't researched them, it's pretty crazy. So listen.
One thing we're asking companies, you have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. What we are doing internally is, if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted. Okay, you have to force behaviors. And if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team.
Like we've been trying to tell you guys, all of these companies are owned by somebody else, and somebody else is pushing this agenda. So you can either continue to fund it, knowing this is what they're pushing, this is what they're doing. I mean, there's so much proof it's not even funny. Or you can stop funding it. Seriously.
So,
dang it, that's crazy.
So BlackRock is in everything. Like I mean, like when you talk about money, they got money for days. I don't know if you remember the Scrooge McDuck cartoon where he used to go swimming in the money pit. He did the backstrokes and his gold coins. But
Jeez.
No, did you have anything you wanted to say?
No, just it was what he said was just so alarming and so crazy. That should alarm everyone. That should be like the most offensive thing. But we're like,
right?
Whatever. Pride Month, whatever.
Exactly.
The folks that support Pride should be offended by that. Just everyone should be offended by that. It's just crazy.
It's crazy, right? So so Larry Fink, again, CEO of BlackRock Entertainment, and when you hear his words, he's saying race and gender. You can read that clearly as what he's talking about is not race and gender. He's talking about critical race theory, and LGBTQ ideology. So he's saying I watched I couldn't find the longer interview. I watched, and this just came out, I think, in the past 20 hours or so, this interview, or it just popped on the scene. I don't know when exactly, how recent it was, but I just saw it floating around. And he was saying they punish these companies financially if they don't meet their whatever their goals are, and those goals can be in implementing things like you see at Target, things like you see at Disney, hiring certain tokens of groups and all this kinds of things. So he said out loud what we've known to be true, but now it's there for everybody to see. So again, the coordinated effort, I would encourage you look up BlackRock and see how much they have their hands in. They're just one piece of a bigger puzzle. So,
and it's sad. I have liked Target's product, but now I'm confronted with a character choice, an issue. It's like, what am I going to do? Am I, and I'm not telling anybody what to do, but it's like you reach a point where you're like, you know what? I know what this does, supporting this company.
Yeah.
And like someone said earlier, I can't remember what interview, but it's like, boycotting something may or may not work, but right now he said that it's effective to not support.
In this case, like it seems to be working.
It seems effective to not support it, to push back, to show the elites that no, you can't push behavior on us. We are adults. We are mature. We are thinking people. We're not robots. We're not animals. We have a conscience, and we're thinking people. We're Christians. We're law-abiding citizens, but we answer to a higher power, and we process things to see if it lines up with our God, not you.
Right, and when you think of this, so I talked about this many times last week as well. When Nerva and I even come across someone, that say, man, I'm struggling in this area. It's a whole different conversation.
For sure.
Now, it's still like, here's what the Bible says, and here's how we all have to deal with sin. Here's how we have to crucify the flesh and kill the deeds of the flesh, put to death those things. But it's a way different tone. But when we're facing the Larry Finks of the world and the George Soroses, those are the guys behind this garbage that's being shoved down our throats day in and day out. I just saw Bank of America, they did this whole pride thing. And so the Bank of America doesn't care about these people that are struggling with this. They don't care about the devastating effects that it's having on people and families and all these things. They're being pressured from the top down by guys like Larry Fink. And so that is the target. Those are the people that are personifying this wicked agenda that are taking on. They're puppets and children of the devil in a sense. Like when Jesus said, those on the side of truth listen to me, but as it is, he said, your father is a deceiver from the beginning. That's who they're under right now as children of Satan. And that sounds crazy, but it's true. And I think you could see
it's obvious.
In a way that we've never seen it before.
They're pushing it. They're hiring folks that believe it to push this movement. And so, it's very sad, very dark.
Right. And so one of the things like that we have to consider as Christians is like, what do we do with that? If you work for these corporations, you have... people were even calling out Joanna Gaines, for instance, because all their line is at Target.
Oh, my gosh.
And they're like, man, are you guys going to say anything? Or are you just going to swallow the whistle?
Holy
you know what
smokes,
I'm saying?
That's true. Magnolia Farms.
Right.
Products that I love. See, it's so hard.
It's a good question. And, kind of related to that, this past week, another thing blew up with Chick-fil-A.
Oh, okay.
And I think it was a guy that worked there for many years, but they moved him over to be vice president of the diversity, equity, inclusion branch. Maybe they started it or it was already there, but they rolled it out. Some sense it came to light this past week that Chick-fil-A was putting this guy over diversity, equity, inclusion. And that's another one of those issues. You see the capitulation. If you want, in fact, go back and listen to our episode. And we have loved many things about Chick-fil-A and the history and all, but I think they're playing a dangerous game, and it started a long time ago, and we pointed that out in these articles, and it kind of blew up when they got rid of the donations to the Salvation Army.
I remember that.
And what was it? The school group, Athletes Christ Fellowship of Christian Athletes. They pulled the funding and they started. Remember back then we said you can't bow the knee to the LGBTQ thing. You keep bowing there's no way. You can't give this ideology an inch. You can't give the Larry Finks of the world and these guys. You can't let them determine that stuff. And so now you have diversity, equity, inclusion, which is thoroughly Marxist and from root to fruit. Now, it's possible that maybe somewhere in the theoretical universe you could craft a DEI program and you could get rid of the Marxist elements. I'll grant that that's theoretically possible, but I haven't seen it happen once yet where it hasn't been infused with elements of critical race theory, because that's what the program is birthed out of. The terms diversity, equity, inclusion have meanings that are connected to the Marxist ideology and all the curriculum that goes with it and everything. So now you have Chick-fil-A taking on that, and it's like, okay, where's this going? Whew. And I think this is the time again. It's like we're repeating history but going deeper. Remember that time the football player came out and said something, and we had that debate, me and you and Steven, about whether he knew what he was getting into or not because he retracted. Drew Brees, that whole deal.
Oh, well, he brought the Bible to school.
He did something, yeah, and then he kind of backtracked big time, and we were like, man, this was like it was super. I do remember that. Super cowardly. In my view, I think you said, well, maybe he doesn't. Well, you were taking the perspective.
Early on, I was thinking that he was shocked to see the pushback he received from, I guess, promoting the Bible or bringing it to school. I can't remember the particulars. It was so long ago. It was long
but it's kind of like history is rhyming, right? Mm-hmm. But the words are getting more intense. So this happened. I want to play this. Okay. This was this past week, and a lot of people were posting this as well. But let me play this real quick.
Close family members of mine, and I am truly sorry for that. I just spoke with my teammates and shared with them my actions yesterday. And I apologize with them. And as of right now, I'm using the Blue Jays resources to better educate myself, to make better decisions moving forward. The ballpark is for everybody. We include all fans at the ballpark, and we want to welcome everybody. That's all I have.
So,
what's this?
Here's the context. So, Sam posted this. This is serious. Anthony Bass is a professing Christian. Mm-hmm. He shared a post supporting the Target boycott. Now he's apologizing for hurting the Pride community and says he'll better educate, quote unquote, educate himself. He's betraying Jesus and his conscience. Pray for him. And I actually here strongly agree with Sam because, that's not what we need. There was a guy for the LA Dodgers, thankfully, that stood up, and he stood up under it, and he didn't budge.
Okay. Good for him.
And I don't want to criticize this guy too much. I mean, that pressure is enormous. But I want to give a model that we can look to and say, let's be like this other guy. Let's not do like this guy did here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And, even Peter betrayed Christ and was restored. We pray this guy truly repents of what he did here. But that's not the model for what God's calling us to.
Wow.
And that's the pressure.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
It's bowing to the specifically. Is it what he's doing is just giving in to the movement?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Okay. He's apologizing because he's saying, they don't want to exclude anyone from coming to the ballpark, from coming to the games. What do you think
he posted the Target thing, and now they're saying you will bow the knee.
Oh, gosh.
Like the music is playing, the statue is up. You use the words. I'm going to better educate
the sound
myself.
Of the music. Okay.
So
better educate myself.
Yeah. What is he going to educate himself on? That's gonna help him to see that it was wrong for him to resist Target's wicked push to indoctrinate kids into sexual anarchy.
Sure.
What he's going to educate himself on.
Yeah, that's it.
A satanic doctrine of sexual anarchy is what he's going to educate himself on. Or he's just lying and giving in to the pressure. Now,
that pressure's coming from somewhere.
It's enormous. It's enormous. You could lose your job, and that's why you have to prepare. Like, you have to prepare to do that, to be willing to take that hit.
That time.
And I was listening to something about the early church, historical, teaching on that. And interestingly enough, in the first, I think it was the first century, it was either first century or early second. No, it was first century. One of the Caesars, the Roman leaders were begging in this one case, the Christians, just accept, like we're good to add Jesus to our pantheon. Like one of the leaders even said, I have a statue of your Jesus and I pray to him every day. Like all I need you to do is come up under state control, basically, and just all you got to do is say Caesar is Lord alongside of it. You see that trick?
Yeah.
And they were said, no, we would die. Caesar is not Lord. Jesus is Lord.
Come on.
And this is another push in the same spirit. You've got to bow your knee to this satanic idol of the LGBTQ ideology, which runs against the very fabric of the essential created order that God made. And we just cannot give that thing an inch. So unfortunately, and I don't mean to be a downer, but I think we need to have our eyes open about what's going on, even in the conservative movement.
Okay. If you want to grow in your confidence in knowing what you believe and why you believe it, if you want to ground your faith in biblical Christianity and step into who God has called you to be, I want to tell you about a great program put on by Impact 360, and it's called Propel. Propel is a one-week transformational leadership and discipleship experience where high school students gather together to be grounded in a biblical worldview as they learn how to follow Jesus, have a godly influence, learn how to disciple their peers, and boldly live out their faith in their daily lives. So they're having 2 sessions this summer. The first one is June 19th through the 25th, and the second one is June 26th through July 2nd. These programs fill up really quickly, and I promise you will not be disappointed. So we'll put the link below if you're interested in looking into it, and we'll see you this summer.
Because we need to know as Christians, like when you go out there and you face these kinds of questions, you're going to get backlash. Know that in advance. Kind of have,
Yeah, don't be blindsided.
Yeah, don't be blindsided by these things. Understand that this is the cultural moment we're in when Satan is working overtime, and he's using this tool as a clear way to drive a wedge and bring Christianity to boot it out of into the margins and out of any realm of influence in the culture.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, many of our heroes are helping that, carrying water for that. Now, what I mean by heroes, I'm using that loosely, but I want to show you another little clip here, and I think this will be telling. But I don't know if you even saw this yet, babe. But this is at a Charlie Kirk Turning Point USA thing. I think this was somewhat recent too. So let me play this for you.
My question is largely directed to Mr. Kirk because you were raised as a conservative. Part of the issue I see here is, what's your name, Rob?
Yeah.
So you're saying, you're behind the times, this isn't conservative. Well, we don't want centrists in the conservative movement. We want to retain our core values.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
We don't want drag.
But here's the thing. It's not about what you want, because here's the thing. The beauty about social media.
So just so you know, that question was being asked from the audience. This is at a Turning Point event with Charlie Kirk, who has done a lot of amazing things. We've been following him the past couple of years, and I really like a lot of their stuff and a lot of his stuff.
Okay.
Well, he's on stage with a guy. I guess his name was Rob. Did he say his name was Rob? So Rob is now talking. He's a black gentleman. I think he identifies as a practicing homosexual.
Okay.
And is speaking at this Turning Point event with Charlie Kirk on the culture war. And so the guy was asking him basically like, hey, how is this consistent with conservatism to have Rob up here speaking and kind of, ratifying a homosexual lifestyle?
Interesting. Okay, so.
And, did you have...
No, I don't.
Okay, so yeah.
But here's the thing. Me, and I can bring myself to the table. And it's not about what you want; it's about what the people want. And if there are enough people in this movement that say, "Hey, Rob is cool, he's gay, whatever," it really doesn't matter what you think. You can say whatever you want, and you can believe whatever you want to believe.
Let me ask my question.
But it's not going to stop me from doing what I'm doing, and it's not going to deplatform me.
So my question is, again, it's directed to Mr. Kirk because he was raised as a conservative. As the guy before has said, you've advocated for homosexuality, said that there's a place for the gay agenda within the conservative movement. My question is, and you're also comfortable with transgenders and cross-dressers, I understand. So my question is there any point where conservatives should take a moral stance on Christian morality, or should we abandon it altogether? So in other words, what is what is your brand of conservatism doing to actually conserve Christian morality? If we're ceding to the left on transgender, gay rights, gay marriage, we don't want that in conservatism.
So you don't want him in the conservative movement? I just want to be very clear. Let's just be... Rob.
So you don't want me in the movement?
No. Not if it waters down. Hold on a sec. I want to be very clear.
Just another.
Hold on a sec.
Sure.
It's interesting, right?
You're bringing some very charged language. I'm going to try to calm down the temperature in the room, so I can try to rationally understand an irrational position.
Why should we
Let me finish.
our fundamental beliefs?
Let me finish. So, I'm a Christian. I believe the Bible is the greatest book ever to exist in the history of the world. and I believe Rob Smith has decency and dignity as an individual in the United States of America. Hold on a second. We're not a theocracy. We never have been.
And you know what? And wait a minute. Let me hop in here. Hold on, because I'm in it. He's addressing me. The thing that I don't understand. Well, I'm addressing you. How about that?
You don't even have the courage to address the gay man on stage.
So the problem that I have with as somebody that is a gay Christian, and this is the problem that I have, because my relationship with God and coming back into the church over the past year and a half is one of the greatest gifts that has been given to me in terms of being in this movement. So my question to everybody who tries to say that, oh, you shouldn't be, Christian because you're gay. Why are you trying to turn people away from God? So if you love God and Christianity is so right, because I do love God, so why would you be trying to turn me away? Why would you be trying to turn me away from God?
So we're going to get
to another thing, and one thing that I don't do,
question.
And one thing that I.
So.
Wow. That's new. I've never seen that. That's very interesting.
So this is a perfect example of progressives want to go off the cliff at 100 miles per hour and conservatives want to go off the same cliff at 50 miles per hour. Because he's basically, this person that tweeted this said Charlie Kirk did not answer the question posed to him about his support for homosexuality and transgenderism, not Rob as a person with dignity.
Sure.
That wasn't the question.
That's very...
and the way he answered it was funny because that's how you would expect a leftist to answer, not Charlie Kirk. He says, oh, you won't even address the gay man. No, the question was about his organization as a conservative organization, supporting not someone who struggles with homosexuality, someone who claims to be gay and actively living the lifestyle and love God, and platforming them in this movement. So here's the
I see.
Same dude from Waterboy posted this. A number of issues that need to be addressed here. Charlie is deflecting and not answering the question. That's true. Mm-hmm. Number two, sure, you can be gay and vote Republican. And I would agree with that. Like, a political party can be made up of a bunch of co-belligerents that even disagree on fundamental things. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But here's what he said. But you shouldn't be a leader in the conservative movement. In the Republican Party, moral standards matter. Mm-hmm. 3, the new conservative movement needs older and wiser men to call out the errors and help channel the excitement and energy of this movement into faithful conservatism.
Come on.
I'm afraid this is not happening. Didn't TPUSA just host about 1,000 pastors at their conference? They did that. This same organization hosted a pastors conference with 1,000 pastors. And again, they've done a lot of amazing things, but this is a fair criticism, I think, of this kind of thing that he's been doing more of. And this is not,
know that. Okay.
Yeah, this is not in any way, it's definitely not biblical. It's not conservative.
Yeah.
And so it can be politically pragmatic and strategic, but that doesn't trump the other thing. And so I think the guy's question was actually good and needs to be answered by Charlie Kirk. Sure. And maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something he could say, well,
where is the organization?
We're just trying to win back power from the crazies. So this is our method. I don't know, something like that. But number 4, lastly, big tent does not mean a secular concept of morality, which is what you see here. Big tent means you have a courageous and faithful leader who understands the centrality of Christ in politics and culture and can capture the trust and confidence of those who might disagree with him. As conservatives, we don't want to fall into the trap of diluting our principles grounded in the Bible. Instead, we should be casting a vision that strengthens our principles and demonstrates why they are the best principles for a thriving nation.
Come on.
And that's why this is an important question. We've been spending time on Christian nationalism because what is the grounding for laws? What is the grounding for a nation? And, Charlie Kirk was saying, well, we're not a theocracy. But the problem is in the broader sense of that term, every nation is a theocracy. It just depends on which God. Mm-hmm. And so the secular God, and, I'm using that term loosely, theocracy, but if you don't, it's always by what standard. Where are you getting your standards from? If you don't have a standard that's ultimately rooted in God, then it's not a good standard. And so how do you build a conservative political movement that's supposed to be principled and based on standards that's lost its grounding for that standard and goes directly against it? And I think that's the problem. And I do understand the practicality of what he's trying to do. I just think it's misguided, and hopefully, I don't know. I thought that was very interesting. And we're running out of time here, so I won't be able to spend a lot of time on this last part, but man, I wish we had more time. Maybe we'll be able to get back into this in the future, but this was the Ted Cruz tweet heard around the world this past week. You guys have probably already seen it, but so the Uganda law, I don't know if you have been following that, but they basically signed in what many have called anti-gay legislation, and it includes the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality, which is has a specific meaning in their context. A lot of it, I think, when people heard what they're talking about, would be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Raping, homosexual raping of kids or passing on AIDS and that kind of thing through that activity. But anyways, so lots of responses to this, but the interesting thing was to see one of our so-called the most right of the mainstream federal politicians, and Ted Cruz, right, who's done a lot of good stuff, and we've applauded him at many times. In some ways, he's been squishy on some things, in my view, but for the most part, he's been one of the stronger guys. But here's what he wrote. This Uganda law is horrific and wrong. Any law criminalizing homosexuality or imposing the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality is grotesque and an abomination. So I'm read that again, just in case you missed that. Any law criminalizing homosexuality or imposing the death penalty for aggravated homosexuality, in this case, raping children, whatever, passing on, AIDS, is grotesque and an abomination. And he says all civilized nations should join together in condemning this human rights abuse.
Human rights.
And then he hashtags LGBTQ. Ted Cruz.
Jeez, what is going on? That is so bizarre.
Now I'm going to bring you to the old English Standard Version. Leviticus 20:13. If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them have committed what? What does that say there?
An abomination.
They shall surely be put to what? Death. Their blood is upon them. Now, even for someone who's not advocating that the Old Testament law would still apply in a context like America, so that would be most Baptists, probably everybody outside of the theonomist camp would say those laws, you can't really translate them into this context because that was specifically for Israel under the Old Covenant. Let's just accept that perspective for the moment. Even if that's the case, what Ted Cruz said was any law, not any modern law, like any law criminalizing, even criminalizing homosexuality. He's making a universal statement. And he's calling that law an abomination that's grotesque, that all nations, all civilized nations should rise up and condemn. So many people pointed out that, what Ted Cruz is doing here is calling good evil and evil good. And in essence, like he's saying that God's law that he gave to Israel was an abomination, not that the act was an abomination like God said. So and there's so much more that could be said from this. And that's why I would encourage, and if you're listening to this and you still want to get in that book club, we're going to be doing Mere Christendom for a couple months, maybe just a couple sessions, maybe a few sessions. But this is what we have to discuss. We have to go into the details and we have to wrestle that out. How does the Old Testament law apply to these times, to this nation? Does it apply? Is it natural law? Should it be general equity, theonomy, all these kinds of things? Good questions.
Yeah.
But no matter what position you take, like Ted Cruz is clearly way off on this. Wow. Like not even kind of close. Like that's the kind of that his statement is an abomination. That's the kind of thing you expect on the AOC lips, not Ted Cruz. And so, and he pulled up a New York Times article just as an aside that he was referencing in this positively, but that's just another funny thing. But I don't have time to go in through all that. But this was good. Joel Webbin said. He said, take not, brothers. I don't know if he meant that. He said, this conservative is not calling sodomy an abomination, as the scripture explicitly says. Instead, he is calling the just penalty according to God's immutable law an abomination.
Wow.
So people were, Toby Sumter said this, Ted, was God's law in the Old Testament ridiculous? Why were the sodomy laws on American law codes for hundreds of years? Were those ridiculous? Yeah, because there were laws in America's history like that as well. So he's been more indoctrinated by, it's just funny to see someone like that take such a bad position. Like there's so many better things he could have, questioned and actually gotten to like legitimate questions regarding that issue, but the way he said it was, pretty much as bad a tweet as you can make. So here's the Archbishop of Uganda. This guy, I don't know a whole lot about him, but the little bit I know, I'm like, I wish I could bring him in to be our evangelical leader in the U.S. Is Dr. Stephen Kazimba. The Archbishop, I won't read this whole thing, but of Uganda, has expressed his church's gratitude for a hardline anti-homosexuality law in the country approved this week. International organizations and political figures described themselves as appalled by the new law. Now listen to this. Homosexuality was already illegal in Uganda, but the new law introduces new offenses such as the promotion of homosexuality and harsher punishments, including the death penalty for aggravated, quote unquote, aggravated offenses. And again, you can go and look at the law, but it's pretty gruesome stuff that is defined under that heading. So I want to, let's see if he's speaking here. I think this is him. Let me see the statement that he made.
Read that last paragraph. He reiterates his belief.
Where's that at, babe?
Right there, right above that.
Oh, okay. He reiterates his belief expressed previously in his Easter message that homosexuality is, quote, currently a challenge in Uganda because it's being forced on us by outside foreign actors against our will, against our culture, and against our religious beliefs.
Come on, see. Against our will, our culture, and religious beliefs from the outside.
So this is a perfect example of LGBTQ ideology coming from the West who pretends to be anti-colonization.
Preach.
Trying to colonize these African nations into their warped mindset.
Preach. Oh,
so you have, it always eats itself up. Like here you have wokeism going toe-to-toe with LGBTQ ideology. Yeah. And guess who won?
Yes.
Sexual anarchy wins over, and that's basically what happened with BLM. It was a transgender movement from the beginning. It was a Marxist transgender movement from the beginning. They used black people to push this idea and then kicked them out of the car as soon as they didn't need them anymore.
You've not heard about anything. It's been about transgender this whole time. Yet, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black.
Right, exactly.
If you're not transgender, actually, is what he really should have said.
Right.
That's crazy.
So it says Dr. Kazimba praises Ugandan lawmakers for crafting the new law, which he said offered greater protection of children through strong anti-grooming measures. This is his words. Strong restrictions on promotion and protection of children by not allowing those convicted under the act to be employed in organizations that work directly with children. That's just common sense that we don't have over here. Is that, you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
He goes on, he said, they disguise themselves as human rights activists, but are corrupting real human rights by adding LGBTQ to their agenda. And he adds, there is no moral equivalence between LGBTQ relationships, which cannot procreate, he said, and lifelong heterosexual monogamous marriage.
Come on.
And he even goes on to blame homosexuality. They say it appears he blames it for the decline of many developed countries. He says those countries that legalized homosexuality a long time ago have seen a long time decline in their population growth. In fact, many of those countries are now faced with the problem of negative population growth. Negative population growth leads to the collapse of countries, cultures, civilizations, and economies. And if you look up the Global Sexual Revolution book, they note how this was actually part of the plan of many people, including the UN, to depopulate certain nations through the this will be one part of the agenda, not the whole thing, but this was one part of the agenda. He ends his statement with general remarks about sexual temptation. He said, "We must recognize we also have major challenges in our families and communities with heterosexual immorality. Many of the people loudly protesting against homosexuality are quietly fornicating or betraying their spouse through gender-based violence, adultery, or defiling their own children." So he's, they're trying to actually implement positive laws for sexual ethics in a good, godly way. And I just think this is so ironic. And, so many people responding, Uganda forever. And it was that was one of the hashtags.
That's great.
And you went there.
Oh, I loved it, to visit. It was some years ago with the worship team, and it was great. I mean,
You said thousands right out in the field.
Oh,
you were with Chris Tomlin.
It was,
and it was
a worship conference. It was the regionals for
Passion.
The Passion regionals. This was a long time ago, though.
10 years maybe.
College students it was at least 20,000 of them out there just worshiping and praising God. It was powerful. Man. And so it's just good to see that they have good, strong moral leadership, godly leadership, just trying to preserve. You could just tell he just loves his nation because he cares enough to guide them in the right direction, a godly direction. So
no, for sure. And I forgot to read this one. The U.S. President Joe Biden, it said, described the legislation as a violation and suggested that Uganda would risk losing aid and trade deals if it was not repealed. So a subtle threat there. Now, isn't this perfect?
It's really interesting.
That's who the evangelicals for Biden wanted, the so-called woke, I'm for black people evangelicals for Biden. See, it all falls apart, man. It's just, it's really a joke. If you ain't black, you ain't vote. This guy. And so, it's like this is just the perfect case scenario. But I love it, man. I love the fact that, the African leaders were the ones really trying to rescue the United Methodist Church that was becoming apostate on this issue as well. And they were saying, no, we're not going with y'all on that. Now the African nations are showing us what real Christian nationalism looks like.
That's great. You can't make
So anyways, yeah, man.
God is just brilliant.
He's good. He is good, man. I love it. He's a brilliant.
Who'd have thought? Uganda, come on, represent.
Represent. And so
fearlessly.
Yeah, man.
Just fearless. I love that.
Yeah. And some people might be listening as like appalled, like you want to kill gay people. Like if you look at the bill, it's not what it's being presented as, but it needs to challenge us because many of us have become like Ted Cruz, and we've been catechized in this idea that that gay rights, quote unquote, are something that should be respected in a civilized nation, and we have to ask, by what standard? And that's what we want to dive into in our book study with Mere Christendom. So, anyways, thank you guys so much for hanging with us this week, and we will see you next time.